Hello and welcome to this worldanvil.com video. We're looking today at the document template. Now that's this template that looks at treaties, books, manuals, guild charters, you name it. That's what this template looks at. Now it is packed with stuff, but when I first saw this I was like, well, do I really care? Do I really need to worry about a document or a template? I mean, a book, or surely that's something that you kind of just jot down in your notes and off you go. Well, then I started to realize that there is so much more to just a document than just the document. And it all came from this one little tab here called Medium. Now, there is a range of options there, and initially you go, well, it's on paper, it's a document, that's what it's written on. But why is it on paper and not on, say, crystal? Or perhaps it's even more subtle than that. It's the realignment of something within something, or it's a tankard, or it's a clay tablet. Now, these kinds of things should inspire you to push your documents in a new direction. And in that direction, there's two different areas that you can look at. One is direct information and the other is indirect information. Now, by direct information, I'm talking about the actual contents of the document. If it's a peace treaty, if it's a spell, if it's a map coordinate, whatever the purpose of that document might be, and there's a space for you to put in purpose within the space of the document template, but whatever its purpose is, whatever the actual information is, that's the direct information. That's all the stuff that you're going to be giving out to your audience so that they can get some kind of feedback. The indirect information is where you should be pushing yourself creatively to think outside of the box, to try and really get to grips with the tone of your entire setting. So if you have this gritty tone, perhaps the document is inscribed on the inside of the brain case of a skull of a child. If you have a post-apocalyptic setting, perhaps it's inscribed on an old street sign, which the back of is a warning, caution, falling rocks type of thing. So you can really add in a lot of additional information just by thinking about what your document is written on. And it goes even further. It talks about the climate at the time. So in other words, if it was written on papyrus, we know that there must have been a fairly tropical climate in order for this papyrus to have grown in the first place. That's something that's really indirect in terms of information. If we're now in a desert, we have to start questioning what were the environments like beforehand. So we get more questions out of the object than out of the actual contents of that information. If the object is from a particular culture, what expresses that culture in that documentation? In your fantasy world, perhaps you have humans and you have gnomes. Gnomes are not the same as humans, so why would they use paper? Why would they write on paper? Maybe they want to write on something that's not so flammable, so they write on sheets of metal. These very thin sheets of metal, perhaps. Or perhaps they write on something else. Maybe they don't write. Maybe they use pictograms. It's all up to you and how much additional indirect information you want to pack into this document is entirely limited by your creativity. So as an example, imagine the party or the adventurers are looking for this dwarven text that talks about the names of the kings who were responsible for signing into being a treaty which now threatens to destroy the entire world. Imagine the delight of your audience, whether they're players or readers, when they come across the document, but it's actually a drinking tankard that has inscribed on the outside of the tankard the images of the dwarves, but on the inside of the tankard, when the tankard is filled with beer, the names of those dwarves are illuminated magically. Now you've given us so much more information. You've given us the fact that these dwarves drank beer, that they valued beer, and that it is only through the consumption of beer that we learn each other's true names. All of those kinds of images, all that kind of indirect information suddenly makes that thing feel a lot more real. If we put it into a science fiction context, imagine this asteroid. It's a lump of rock, which as far as scans are concerned, there's no writing on it whatsoever. It doesn't activate anything. It just is a lump of rock. Until one of the scientists scans that rock and finds that the silica crystals within the rock have all been aligned in a very specific way. And that when you then look at that as a printout or as a digital display, you start to then be able to read the information that's contained within that. So then that talks to a very advanced civilization, but a civilization who realized that unless they buried their information in the rock face, it would get erased and lost forever. And that comes from the idea of, in ancient Egypt, when a new pharaoh took over, if they didn't like the previous pharaoh, they would just order all of their information erased. Now, that literally meant chipping away at the hieroglyphics that were inscribed on all of the statues and obelisks and etc., etc., etc. So it was a mammoth task. And of course, some things got through, and that's how we know about the pharaohs who weren't very popular. The idea that there is this culture that has to preserve its information buried within the actual rock itself speaks to so much more than just the basic contents. So think of the document, think of what you want the document to say, and of course you have to outline that, and you have to make sure that you've written it down so that your audience can then use that information later. But then think about how you can add in more information, and this medium template here, it just triggers the imagination. I mean, I'm not going to go through them all there because you can read, but the idea is that there is so much more than just a piece of paper that the document template promises. I hope this has inspired you to push your documents to the next level. And until next time, light up the forge.